the Sound Tracker, and I've got a really unusual format to show you today. This is a CD format that was released in 1987, which had a few good ideas in the making, but ended up in a lot of confusion and had pretty much all but been discontinued by 1990. Today we're going to be talking about CD video, the format that was almost the world's best CD single. CD video in its first form is a special kind of hybrid compact disc. The interior section contains up to 20 minutes of PCM digital audio, and the outer section contains 5 minutes of analog LaserDisc video, also paired with PCM digital audio. The overall capability of CD video does sound a bit limited on the surface, but there is a technological setback to using a compact disc this way. CDs and LaserDiscs are read by a laser. A beam of light shines from a laser lens that tracks from the inside of the diameter of the disc to the outside, focused on a very specific point. The laser is aimed at a series of peaks and valleys in the disc, and the aluminum layer reflects that light back into a sensor in the lens, which creates an electrical signal based on the light that it sees. Light becomes signal, signal becomes decoded by circuitry, and eventually results in either video and/or audio depending on the format. The difference between them, though, is one signal is a lot more robust than the other. This is a massive oversimplification, but in general, audio signals are simpler than video signals. Audio in a digital form has a smaller bandwidth and doesn't take as much space to store when it's converted to pulse code modulation like this. Since there's less information to handle, a CD can spin slower while having more room for the signal, so you can squeeze about 20 minutes of sound into the audio section of the disc. LaserDisc analog video, on the other hand, is encoded by frequency modulation and has a massive bandwidth, which has a lot more to account for. In addition to sound, there's color, brightness, contrast, a whole host of stuff embedded in the signal, and all of that takes more space. This means that the signal needs to reside in more physical area on the disc, and needs to spin faster to be able to reproduce the information accurately, so there's only room for 5 minutes of video. I never expected it to be so clear here on the format itself, but where the texture changes, that's where the information stored changes. The outer half is video, and the inner half is just audio. It's an odd mix, but it's one with a purpose. This was intended to be the next evolution in music singles. By the 80s, if you wanted the latest radio hits, you could either buy a 45 single with 2 songs, or a cassingle, which was a cassette tape that had the latest single on it. Or the more likely option, you were taping it off the radio, but that usually came with mixed results in quality for a number of reasons. Anyway, CDs didn't actually start with the single scene until about 1987, when the 3-inch single and its more robust counterpart, the CD video, made their debut. The idea was simple. Everyone already likes compact disc, it's a massive success, so what's a good way to evolve that in the market? Well, choices. For less money, you have a 3-inch CD that has a couple of songs on it, and for the cost of more money, you have a hybrid compact disc with video. The inner CD portion of the discs are playable in anything that recognizes and plays CDs. It'll just load up and play the audio because it thinks there's a CD in the machine. But take that same disc and put it in a CD video player, and you get the latest music videos as well as the latest set of singles, and that is a hell of an idea! Think about it. In the 80s, if you wanted to see music videos, all you had was MTV, and I'm not even sure you could write to the station and order yourself a copy of the broadcast tape. Now, eventually a music video might come out on a compilation like this. Or, more likely than that, you'd probably be finding live footage. Or, you'd be trying to tape the music video as it was being broadcast, which also had mixed results in quality for reasons. But this presented music videos in a higher quality than VHS and definitely a higher quality than over-the-air broadcasts. Great idea, so why was it more or less dead, 3 years after its release? Well, I think there might have been a couple of reasons. Starting, just from an audio perspective, it's really hard to justify buying into the format because there were better options available for music. I mean, you had a turntable, you had a Walkman, the 8 tracks that were moved into the garage. I mean, something with more than 20 minutes of music on it. The runtime of the format is admittedly a bit of a drawback, but the point as it was marketed was selling singles. And, I mean, singles compilations aren't normally more than 20 minutes long anyway, even with dance and club mixes present. Now, even so, being limited to 20 minutes of audio for a CD is, well, just that, it's limiting. More often than not, I find alternate mixes of songs on these discs, and I think it would have been a better push to have something like an artist interview. If I were going to go out of my way to buy a music video on a niche format that had bonus audio, I'd want to hear either about the production of the music video or the details of the album coming up, not songs that I was already going to buy on the album that was almost available anyways. On the video side of things, even with the CD video format adding in music videos, the limitations then get placed on this particular player, which also exists in a bit of a less for more ideology. The CD video single players are not at all common in the US, probably because full CD albums had been on the market since 1982. And by 1987, most people had gotten used to the idea of CDs being something you listen to, not something you watch. If you've already bought a CD player for about $500, you're not going to want to go back to the store and buy a dedicated video single player for $600, especially if all it can add to compact disc playback is 5 minutes of video. You'd have to be really into music to want to buy this, or really into AV equipment. With all that said about the lackluster abilities of the format, this is a surprisingly robust player. It's absolutely packed with all of the functions that I look for in a CD player. We've got a number pad for direct access and programming of a playlist. We have variances in the time counter from track time counting up, remaining time of the disc, and the total time of the album. This thing even has index searching. I never see this on CD players unless it's a really high-end model, so this tells me they paired a quality CD player with the video portions that they were trying to add in. If you do want to know more about this player, I'll be making a separate video dedicated specifically to it because it's honestly kind of grown on me. Speaking of the video on this player, the robust amount of options continues back here. We have sections for an antenna pass-through, as well as channel 3 or 4 RF out for TVs that connect via the Type F coaxial adapter. There's also composite video, which is a really nice touch given that most TVs at the time would have been using this. And my favorite of the little quirks of this player, it has both stereo over RCA and a mono RCA output? I have never once seen that on anything that wasn't, shall we say, of a certain vintage. But having a mono out on this CD player, honestly, this whole back panel, having to adapt to so many standards, really gives a clear view as to the difference between television sound and hi-fi sound at the time, because, quite frankly, audio for televisions was, for a long time, really behind the times. Televisions in the 80s were very separate from hi-fi systems, and anything that you were watching, VHS, game systems, broadcast TV, all of that was usually centered around where the TV was localized in the living room. Whatever sound you got out of it largely because most people listened to the audio from their media of choice through the speaker in the television. It's a really hard push to ask someone to buy something like a CD video player, and have to rearrange the furniture to move the stereo closer to the TV, and have to figure out how to connect the stereo system itself to the TV, all for a few music videos. Nobody was going to do that because their entertainment systems were divided. Audio in this corner, video in the other one. Hell, even into the 90s, I don't remember a single living room TV ever having been hooked up to someone's stereo. Honestly, this is all kinds of the right ridiculous for me. I love it. That same ideology is really less of an issue for LaserDisc players, though. CD video single players might have been a flash in the pan, but the functionality of that player, from the time it was conceived, was also added to LaserDisc players, which I'm really glad to see because it makes finding a device to play this format a lot easier than looking for some obscure player. There is a bit of a caveat to that statement, though. Before 1987, when CD video came out, there were already a few combination LaserDisc and compact disc players on the market. And those ones will play regular CDs and LaserDiscs, but not this CD video format because the functionality is not built into those players to recognize the 5-inch disc as a CD video disc. It will only play the CD section. That same logic unfortunately applies to DVD players and computers as well, though I don't know if a special ripping software exists for these, so if you're at all curious about collecting them, look for a LaserDisc player made after 1987. You'll see marks somewhere on the player saying that it can read the discs like these ones here. CD video as a format really is a bit of an easier sell with a combo player like this, though. You could have one player be the heart of the system, have one machine that plays the 3-inch CDs, regular-sized 5-inch CDs, that newfangled CD video, 8-inch LaserDiscs, full-sized 12-inch LaserDiscs, and of course the latest CD video 12-inch discs. This saga is far from over. CD video also had full 12-inch LaserDisc-sized discs for more robust performances. Things like rock and pop shows, musical plays, classical concerts, even some movie titles were available on the format. But what really makes this work is that all of those discs are playable in a LaserDisc player. And this is the kind of thing that really makes that smaller singles player pale in comparison. I wouldn't move my stereo closer to the TV for that, but I sure would for this.
With his bulging eyes, I give my all for his cherished prize. Way out is the way, way out is the way.
Everywhere, she's a very fine girl. She's from the west side to the east side. Everybody.
You take 5 fingers and put it to your heart. SWEAR.
Aside from being a full concert or movie, CD video 12-inch discs also have the added benefit of PCM digital audio the same way that the 5-inch discs do. The digital audio signal is combined into the disc with the analog video, and for backwards compatibility, the analog audio band is still present, so these discs are playable in older analog-only players. And that's so much better, right? I mean, the benefits of LaserDisc's high-quality picture. It's crisp, clear analog audio, coupled together with high-quality PCM digital audio, finally together and for sale at last. Except that digital audio had been on LaserDisc since 1983! This copy of Chicago 17 is an early attempt at getting digital audio and music videos on a LaserDisc the same way that CD video might have done. This mark in the corner is meant to signify digital stereo tracks, and the jacket is one of a select few that bear this logo here at the top to show the combined effort. Compact disc, LaserDisc. That same logo also implies that this particular disc is a mix of stuff content-wise. There's 2 music videos, and the rest of the disc follows the tracks of the album the same way that its CD counterpart would, with a little more of an interactive touch. The music videos are just that, music videos, and a pretty good addition to the disc. I'm really glad these are included on here. The rest of the album, which follows the tracks of the CD, shows the cover of the album and the name of the track playing, which is neat, but I really think they missed a trick by not including the lyrics on screen. That would have been cool. In any case, this disc, having digital audio, also has the ability to switch back to the analog soundtrack. As a matter of fact, the combination of digital and analog sound is quite popular on LaserDiscs, and it spans over a majority of movie titles as well, so there really wasn't much of a point to a 12-inch CD video. Now you might think at this point, well, maybe the content was different on CD video, I mean, especially if they're more focused on concerts and music videos. But regular LaserDiscs also had a selection of music videos and concert footage. This already existed 4 years before CD video was even a thing! 12-inch Sometimes CD videos even register in my LaserDisc player as a fucking LaserDisc, so they're not even shy about it! It's not a different format, it's a rebranding of LaserDisc. The only ones that register any differently are the 5-inch ones, and I think that's more to distinguish the fact that, the disc is divided into 2 bits! So, in addition to selling you something that already doesn't have much of a selling point, this format is also trying to sell you something that already exists. So much so that when I bought my first one of these, this Rush Grace Under Pressure Tour disc, I didn't even notice that there was a difference because it reacts the same way in my LaserDisc player as a standard LaserDisc, and I hadn't read about the CD video format yet. Now, that got me wondering, if this is the same as a LaserDisc and this over here is, too little or too clunky or whatever for, a selling point, what the hell was even the purpose of all this? The more I looked into the format, the more I kept seeing a pretty common theme. Philips showing off their latest design for the compact disc, and mentions of the European market not taking to LaserDisc. The more research I did, the more this made sense. In Europe at the time, LaserDisc was not popular. One of the articles that I read mentioned something like only 12,000 homes having adopted a video disc machine in total. Videotape beat that one out by a landslide, but Philips figured that by rebranding an already unpopular system, while piggybacking off of the success of the compact disc, they'd have a little bit more strategized luck with sales, so out with LaserDisc, in with CD video. Now add to that a new hybrid disc and even more reason to buy into the format, right? Well, that takes care of the logic of the rebranding, but there was another reason for the shift in marketing to take place in Europe. I showed earlier the ability for 12-inch discs to switch between analog soundtracks and digital soundtracks, and while that works on the 12-inch discs, it does not work on any of my 5-inch discs. That is a holdover from the European standard for CD video, and it encompasses the reason for the switch in brand overseas. European analog video is displayed in a format called phase alternating line, and due to differences in video standards, the PAL signal's bandwidth is a little more widely spaced on the disc. This means that European LaserDiscs can only ever have either analog tracks or digital tracks, no mixing the two. In the US, however, the analog broadcast system we used was devised by the National Television Standards Committee, and NTSC has no trouble whatsoever storing both analog and digital audio signals for the same reason. The video standard meshes together a little easier with the audio tracks because there's more bandwidth available. That was the whole idea. Shift from the LaserDisc brand to the CD video brand to promote the future of analog video with digital audio. And if few enough people had already bought into LaserDisc in Europe, this technical limitation would be a little easier to market. But some people had in fact already bought into LaserDisc, and I doubt that they were enthused about now needing to buy a new player, and having to choose between digital and analog discs, and having to deal with so many names that really just mean the same thing. We've got DiscoVision, we've got LaserVision, we've got LaserDisc, and CD video. It really just creates more confusion than is necessary. I did hear about a buyback program that said essentially, bring your old analog player and we'll give you a discount for a new combination player, but I'm not even sure how far that went, because after a little while, CD video just kind of gave up and started entering the market as digital sound LaserDiscs. And that is a damn shame, because while I'm not too fond of this for being duplicitous, I'm kind of drawn to the idea of this. Imagine for a second that, 12-inch discs had stayed on the LaserDisc platform, that they had never existed as CD video, and that the 5-inch ones were this only sort of niche thing that existed as a way to get people to buy single music videos. And on top of that, if the combination players were the only ones that existed, it would be a little bit more of an incentive to buy a LaserDisc player, because the mini machine doesn't really have much of a purpose either. It would have been awesome to have a library of music videos from artists like this ready to be able to watch. Would have! There's an elephant in the room when it comes to CD video that I need to bring up now, and it's a pretty bronze-looking elephant. CD videos go through a very particular kind of disc rot called bronzing. According to a Wikipedia page I found, these discs were pressed by a company called Philips DuPont Optical in the UK, using silver instead of aluminum as the reflective layer, and this bronzing happens because there were imperfections in the disc when it was first manufactured. What's happening here is the glue between the two layers of plastic is separating, and the silver is reacting to the sulfur content in the paper sleeve. Over time it's gotten to a point where these discs are barely playable, if at all. Eventually the disc becomes cloudy, which makes it harder for the silver to reflect back the information that it needs to from the laser, and the disc will begin to separate because the glue is crap, like with my copy of Def Leppard here. I can't rightly play those 12-inch discs because I don't have a PAL player, but quite a lot of my 5-inch discs with the yellow plastic are also doing this, and here's what happens when a disc rots. The sound starts fine at the beginning, but becomes heavily distorted, and the picture starts to get grainy and noisy. I have 10 of these discs, and only 4 of them will play a video with no issue all the way through. Fortunately so far, I haven't had too much trouble with my NTSC 12-inch discs, which seem to play both audio and video just fine, though they're getting a little bit rough around the edges. Rush, for instance, has some marks between the layers that seem like they want to move inward, but they're not interfering with the data area of the disc just yet, which ends right about here. Tina Turner, on the other hand, is going through that same clouding pattern that the golden PAL discs I have are all going through, so it seems like a real flip of the coin for a lot of these to be able to show up without some form of disc rot. This disc is also still playing just fine, but I don't expect it to live much longer because these discs that were pressed in the UK by PDO will all exhibit this kind of rot at some point. And honestly, I wish more of these discs had been mastered and pressed in Japan because Japan had higher quality control standards. This is a branch off of the CD video format called Video Single Disc, which is essentially CD video without the 20 minutes of audio. This format was only released in Japan, and here is what quality control will do for your product over time.
116をすると、ハッピーハッピーハッピーと脇の下が喜んでしまうのです。ヒヤッと素肌が喜ぶ香りよ。116。
ボディフレッシュもよろしく。
This really could have been better, and that's really what irks me about this whole situation. What could have been? I mean, I can't even really say it's worth collecting these right now because so many of them are rotting, but if you manage to find one out in the wild, I do think it's definitely worth taking it home and seeing if it's still in working shape, because these are disappearing more and more every day, which is unfortunately nothing new, even for this format. One of the articles that I ran across talking about CD video made mention of some hesitation to buy into the CD video format because they were anticipating an entirely separate format that was also in development, and would be playable on the CDI Compact Disc Interactive Multimedia Player from Philips. That format was going to be an all-digital audio and video format which would come to be released in 1993, and would shortly be succeeded by Video CD in 1994. Seriously, not a joke, Video CD is an entirely separate format from CD video. Where one is a hybrid LaserDisc and CD, the other one is a fully digital MPEG-1 encoded disc, and is absolutely playable on a standard DVD player.
Excuse me.
If somebody was already anticipating this kind of functionality in a video CD, then CD video has even less of a chance to stand on its own merits. And in any case, it's a pretty fascinating bit of history, and really impressive to me, the way all of these technologies were connected together and experimented with. I mean, being able to see and use the results of these experiments like this gives me a much greater appreciation for the effort that went into, the discovery and the science behind it. And I wonder what it would have been like if these kinds of formats had a better foothold in the market around here. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you like this video, you know what to do.